Hey everybody, welcome to the Vocal Advancement Podcast. I am Tom, one of your hosts today on this webinar, and I'm joined by the lovely Heather.
Witam.
Witam to you too.
That's Polish for anyone wondering what on earth I just said. Apparently, anybody who's Polish might be going, no, not really. So, who have we got on this episode, Tom?
Well, today's episode, we are talking to Chris Johnson, who was doing a webinar for us about using movement as a tool to assess the voice.
That's right.
Chris Hark's from the UK as well, so he's another fellow UKer.
And he is a very successful podcaster.
He is indeed, yes.
We've got a lot to learn from Chris and his podcasting. He has one of the most popular kind of podcasts on The Voice and chatting to people out there. Although I don't think he's done it for a long time, has he?
I think they're on a break, yeah, but they do have a couple of hundred episodes under the belt, I believe. So, you know, a little bit of way to go there.
I was going to say, we've got a few more years to catch up with that. A few more episodes to
catch up with that, yeah. But yeah, no, it was an interesting chat. So I think let's just get straight to Chris and talk to Chris.
Let's go talk to Chris. Welcome, Chris. It's lovely to have you here. You recently did a webinar for us, which was fantastic. We've had some great feedback on that, by the way. It was great. And I know there'll be other teachers who are watching back the recording and people who can kind of see the class afterwards. So we'll continue to get feedback, I'm sure.
Great.
So today is just a bit of a chit chat. We like a bit of a chit chat.
Chinwag.
I was just going to say, Tom and I were talking about using the word chinwag, and then we thought, no one outside of the UK will have a clue what we're talking about if we say we want to have a chinwag with someone. So I guess the first thing we wanted to kind of ask you about was what led you into doing what you have currently been doing and what you were talking to us about in terms of using movement as a diagnosis tool for singing. Did you just happen to lift your arms up in the shower one day and go, ooh, what was it?
Yeah.
What was it that kind of stirred that intrigue and, passion for that side of things?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it could, for some people in history, I'm sure those kind of epiphanies have come at those intensely mundane moments. Not necessarily this time. I mean, to be fair, I reckon I could trace back my enjoyment of sort of biology, if you like, back to when I was at school, because I was pretty much crap at everything else apart from biology, and actually, funny enough, French, which is maybe part of that whole the auditory aspect. I was good at languages and bodies, you know what I mean? So I think it made sense that eventually I am where I am, which is quite funny. But so I think that has always been part of my sort of the innate interest that I seem to have anyway. And then I went on into my sort of late 20s. I did a lot of physical work, as in I did a lot of gym work, sport, and got interested in physiology in that way. And that started to open up the sort of the weird and wonderful connections in the body. Certainly if you think about how people stretch out muscles, they used to see it as the muscles are in knots or something like this, and you have to stretch them out and all the fibers become ordered. But then lots of research was coming out and saying, well, that's not quite how it works. It's more of the brain really decides if it wants to let that muscle relax or not. So we have to talk to the body in a far deeper language. And I learned quite a bit of that about sort of working with my own flexibility and injury within the gym as well. So that really sparked it off, and that got me into something called Feldenkrais and massage. So Feldenkrais, for anybody who doesn't know, is a sort of a somatic education thing, somatic being of the body. And so with that kind of, although it was developed over a long time by Moshe Feldenkrais, he was like really weirdly on the money in terms of how he was like, well, if you kind of put your mind in a certain place and do this mindful practice of moving body parts in any weird combination possible, you'll learn something about how your body is made, stacked, moves, the pains and the releases in it, and that all that kind of movement sends updates, if you like, to the mainframe, and those updates, particularly in the case of, let's say, your body map or your body image, if you like, and how it's mapped in your body, which feeds into things like proprioception and your awareness of where your tongue might be and how your jaw sits and where your head is on your shoulders. All of those things become then intensely more valuable as a singer. And then I found that with that sort of practice, singers are able to actually make really amazing changes once the awareness has been sparked, which is different to saying, did you know your head is forward? Or are you aware you're clenching your jaw? Like, they're all like, don't get me wrong, like they're words I've used in the past, and they have the greatest intention behind them. But as you get deeper into the body, you start to realize that's not the language that the body understands. Move the jaw in different ways, and the person will probably realize it's tight, and you never had to say anything. So it went in that direction, basically. And that's kind of, I think that's really where the whole journey of that, sort of how it came about. And I spent sort of last maybe 8 years working on the movement side from that sort of spark.
So I attended a Feldenkrais workshop once. And maybe you can help me with this, because
it almost...
the things I was asked to do, I found, were pretty much impossible for a woman as well endowed as myself. Certain aspects of my body were getting in the way of my ability to do some of the movements. And so for me, I came away from that thinking, well, that's really not for me. But I'm just wondering whether perhaps there's an easier route in for somebody who's starting out. How would you introduce someone to that? Would you put that into a voice lesson, or is that something you would keep completely separate?
No, I do. Yeah, I do put it into the voice lesson. Was yours like a group mixed class?
It was, and it was online, so I was rolling around on the floor of my studio while I was watching them do it online, which isn't ideal, and they did say they'd prefer to do it in person if possible, but yeah, I was just struggling. I'm like, okay, this is not for me.
Yeah. You know, like, I don't want to speak on behalf of like the Feldenkrais Guild or anything like that, because I'm not qualified in Feldenkrais. I've just done loads and loads of like work within it, and some great educators. One of them is Robert Sassouma, Elizabeth Blades. They're all really great people. And I think the way it's delivered in the traditional sense, I think a lot of like singers that I think I would deal with, and myself, maybe 10 years ago, myself would have gone, what a load of tosh. It's so woo-woo, because I think really like not everybody is really in a place to take on the traditional delivery of Feldenkrais. However, I think that's not to do with the information or the principles necessarily, but it's just the delivery. So what I was quite, I guess, thankful for is experiencing it many, many times, but then coming in actually a few years later with a bit more of an open mind about what this might do. You know, the cynic in me does want to kind of go, oh, I'm not sure about this, but you have that constant struggle with sort of, I guess, cynicism, and maybe the better version is skepticism of that kind of going on. But then seeing it out and going, actually, there's something really cool here. Then you follow the rabbit hole. And then when you bring that into lessons, much like with everything that I do, I tend to look at the usual suspects quite quickly. And I do find that, although it would might make Moshe Feldenkrais sort of turn in his grave about it, but I do very shortened versions of movement protocols that are silent, that do focus on places where I feel like that's going to move the needle for the singer the most. But I always prep it with kind of like, this is really strange, but go with it. And I can later on past the experience, after the experience, and once we've sung and noticed what's different about that, I'll then tell you, if you like, why we did that, if that's something that really allows you to do that again at home rather than just think it was weird stuff. So I do bring in the principles very frequently.
So what are you looking for in someone that makes you think, okay, this particular exercise versus this one is going to be better for them? Or do you just want to get them to try everything and then get them to feel what works best for them?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think when it comes to somebody who comes with I have a problem, here's my problem, then like in the workshop I did for you and you kindly invited me, I showed you 3 assessments in that one. And they would lead me towards potentially a group of traditional exercises like we would expect in a voice lesson, but they have been chosen based on the results of those assessments and others. But I might mix that up depending on the person and the time scales. Okay, so if there's more time, I think the sort of the somatic education route can be quite nice as like a slow paced, but actually has a longer term. It sticks to you better in the long term when it's that way, I find anyway. So we can take a mixture of what would be traditional motor learning exercises and then what would be somatic education exercises, strange movements, and take them again, all based on the assessment, right? But if it's a learner with somebody who's got bags of time, no deadlines, I think the broader the experiences, the better. So I think we might even do something that is completely unrelated, go polar end, almost approach a lesson in terms of, I'd prefer more chaos than order in this lesson. You know, otherwise we tend to follow a path that might not span out into the extremes enough. So I do like to kind of leave, 40% of the lesson for chaos, play,
exploration.
Correct. Yeah, do the thing you think it isn't, do the thing you think it is, and then go away with that. And so I think I choose it differently based on those 2 things.
And what kind of, when you started doing this with your students, what kind of feedback were they giving you as they started to realise how this worked in their bodies and what it did for their voices?
Yeah, initially I didn't have the answers. I just had the assessments. And to be fair, I wouldn't say necessarily that you could have all the answers now anyway. But in the beginning, I compiled maybe four or 5 movements. At the moment, I have like 10 assessments. But in the beginning, I had those, and arms up was very, very right there at the start. So with that, I'd have arms up, and the feedback usually with that, with lots and lots of people, is, "Whoa, it's really odd. Why?" And I'd have to spend a lot of time saying, "I don't know why." I'll get back to you. Okay, no problem saying I'll get back to you. So that I think once you've got like a rocket up your bum, when that happens, then you start going for the next 2 weeks until you see them next. You're going through textbooks, you're like looking at physiology all around and how that might interact with breath, posture, and linking that to the arms up. So I gradually started to get some answers, or at least some directions in which to take the training. So the feedback for that was positive. It led me to try and figure out the issue. But the other side of feedback is the negative part, which is, that really stuffed me on the high note. I can't do what I need to do. And that feedback initially, if I was a training teacher, I'd be scared of that feedback. I would be worried. I'd be like, I've just made someone worse. The cardinal sin of vocal coaching. They've come to me and I've made them worse, right? However, that would only be true if I was to continue to make them worse.
Right.
But with everything that we do as a vocal coach, the negative outcomes, they present us with incredible amounts of information. So if someone places their arms up and their voice gets a lot worse, it can tell you a great deal about how much air their voice is demanding to sing that phrase, right? Usually it's demanding a lot. a lot of either air volume or air pressure, because the chest is used in a lot of people to generate that pressure. So if that's the case, then we'd have to make a judgment to go, would I expect that amount of pressure or flow to be required under F4 when they expect to be in a clear chest voice? You know, and often the answer to that question is no. I wouldn't expect it to take a lot of effort to do that. And that's when you start to go, I made them worse. That tells me this about air and resistance. Do I think that, from what I know about voice and registers and adduction, do I think that aligns with their goals? And I'd make a judgment to say, well, maybe not, or maybe it does. So that negative outcome is either I shall try and help them with that, because that will get them to the goal. Or I might determine that, yes, they sing with a lot of breathiness and the line is really long. So that is a high demand on air. I'm not going to change that. Right. And it all kind of stems from the arms up tells me why that's happening. So, yeah, the feedback can be very varied. But if you can clear the mind enough to take that feedback and not look at it as positive or negative, but look at it as branches of directions.
Yeah. I mean, immediately I'm thinking about a student I was teaching. Bless her. She was on her way up to the Edinburgh Festival the other day and she had a lesson in the service station, like you do. Just pulled over, had a lesson en route up to Edinburgh. But she wanted to go through, she's in an a cappella group, so she wanted to go through some of the songs that were difficult, that had choreography in them. So immediately now I'm thinking about, now I wonder whether some of her choreography had her arms in positions which would have been potentially unhelpful for her.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just thinking this is something that could be particularly useful information just for people to have in their own right. If they are likely to be moving around on stage as they sing, is it worth knowing that, okay, when I put my hands up, suddenly that makes life a lot harder for me. I need to be a diva about it and say, not on the high note, thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, if you've got some control over the choreography, for example, yeah, I think that for me, that's why I found it so interesting and why I've stayed with it for so long, is what you've said is when you take that simple principle and you put it on stage in a real world application and you see why people struggle, that's because you know the interrelationship between breath, resistance, and then what might be resonance as well, which kind of says, well, would a singer who uses more breathiness in their tone be jumping around like Beyonce? And there's a reason why you don't really see that. Mm-hmm. It's not easy because there's just way too much breath for the fitness aspect of it, i.e. moving around, having your arms in lots of positions, which will really starve you of breath when it comes to being breathy. One of the things I do is shake as well, which puts you into a state of physical kind of stability. It kind of activates the core and it makes your body move a lot less within the breathing cycle. So when you think about dancers throwing their center of balance off a lot of the time, their core has to remain quite active the whole time, which doesn't afford a lot of times huge movements of breath, because this breathing system has to do its other job, which is postural support, right? Which means that when someone is like really dancing a lot, you tend to find that, they're going to need a bit of a cleaner tone to be able to do that and not feel absolutely knackered at the end of a gig because they've been breathing for, twice over, right. or because they've been compensating at the throat for their voice to actually deal with the lower volume of air that they actually have available to them from all this movement. So yeah, I love what you've identified there and how that would, what you've seen is two branches: change the choreography, i.e. the voice is more important.
Mm-hmm. Of course, always.
It depends.
Sorry about it, but...
Yeah, but some people might go, well, the performance aspect is the important part and the voice is a texture. Something that's like maybe a show where it's actually a dance show where there's an occasional vocal in it, for example.
Right.
That might be like heavily affected and back in the mix, and it's just there for kind of like an eerie texture. Maybe it's just a vowel or something. Ooh, that kind of thing. So then you would have to go, well, the movement is more important, I'll have to increase adduction then just a little bit, so that the demand of air is lower and they can handle the movement without feeling puffed out or robbed of air. So yeah, that's one of the perfect examples of two choices.
It's great. Okay, I'm going to change the subject now because we are dying to ask you.
Oh yes, go for it. Ask.
So when I was looking up, information about you to introduce you for your webinar, I stumbled across this little nugget that said you had sung for Prince Charles at one point. And when I mentioned it, there was a big grin on your face, and we never got to find out exactly what happened. So I want to know, and I want to hear all about what happened when you sung for His Royal Highness.
Yeah, great. Yes, I remember this. And it is funny because I put this on a Facebook post a little while ago because the memory. I've got the photo of me and Charles shaking hands in the armoury of the St James's Palace, which was like, it's just a great photo. It's just one of those ones where I'm like, look at Daddy. You know, I'll say that in years. Look at Daddy. Look what I did. But it's so we used to do these gigs for the military, and they were actually like, a lot of them were very old vets from like World War II, who would have suffered, like loss of limbs or other fairly life-changing things, including things like PTSD and depression and things like that. So that was a real cool gig because we used to do these gigs in a club in London for them, and they would love all of the old Motown. We do a bunch of jazz as well. They would just love it because it's kind of their era. And then we used to get, off the back of that, we used to get invited to the Buckingham Palace garden party every year. So I've been to the Buckingham Palace garden party 4 times.
Get you!
Wow. Nice.
I took my dad once, because I knew my dad was in the army, so I took him once. So I knew he would be like over
Love it.
the moon. So there was a lot of celebrities, like, if nobody would really know this, so around the world, but my dad was like, "There's Tony Blackburn." It's a big deal, guys. It's a big deal. If you watch Noel's house party in the night, this is a big deal.
Was Mr. Blobby there?
Yeah. Dick and Dom. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
The big ones.
all the A-listers.
Really, really big ones. So we've got a lot of hilarious pictures with people like that, right, on the wall. It's funny, but then because of that, we used to get invited to places. But in the end, what happened was it was Prince Charles's birthday, but it coincided with the 90th anniversary of like the charity that we used to work with for the vets. And so there was this big gig at St James's Palace, which had a bunch of celebrities gigging at it, including us. And we were kind of thinking, why are we here? What are we doing here? This is kind of weird because it's pretty high end. And we did our set, but just before we went on to do our set, like the guy he's looking at his clipboard and he goes, okay. So he's like, next to us like this, remember Jodie Prenger from, she did, Andrew Lloyd Webber's show, like
Her name rings a bell.
Yeah, musical theatre, and she's like, okay, yes. And he looked at us and he was like, okay, and the guys from G4. I mean, Steve, it took me a while. I was like, G4. There's 2 of us for a start, and G4 are they were well,
yeah,
a bit like Il Divo, but from the UK. And he looked at us. He was like, "Okay, 2 guys from G4, Jodie Prenger," and I'm just saying, did he say G4? And then he introduced us as that on the stage. We singing bloody "Sitting on the Dock of the Bay," not like "Sitting on the Dock." It was. It was proper. So we kind of did this. Just realised that the compere and the people in charge absolutely think we're 2 members of G4. And then I'm kind of thinking, oh, that's why we're here. They think we're people we aren't. There we go. And then a few of the old people in the audience are like, that's not G4.
Not G4.
3 songs in, thinking they don't even want us here. It's funny.
Oh, no.
But
I'm sure they enjoyed it just as much as they would have enjoyed G4.
It wasn't on the mic going, I know this is wasn't what you wanted, but whether you like it or not.
Yeah, it's too late now.
Come on, maestro, let's get the music going. Come on. So yeah, but
That's brilliant.
it was funny, but I'll always remember that. And that picture, it doesn't matter. I don't even have to tell anyone that. As long as I got the picture and said, yes, Daddy was important, then it's going to be...
I love that. Oh my! So is that the weirdest gig you've ever done, or can you top that with any others?
Oh no! I mean, it wasn't. To be fair, it's a great gig. I think it's one of the weirdest, most awkward moments at a gig. No, to be fair, the weirdest moment at a gig was when you know, wedding. Some guy comes up, give me the mic. You give him the mic because my other guy, the rock singer in the band, is singing. What's the song? Don't Want to Miss the Thing.
Okay, Aerosmith.
So the guy snatched off him and he shouted, "Don't want to close my eyes!" Like that. We've all had that. And I just, I don't get annoyed anymore. I just stand at the back or I go to the buffet. The desk, it's all right. There's a compressor. No one's ears will pop off. I'll go and get some beige. And I'll come back. And what he did in the end, he did a lot of those riffs at the end, the ad-libs that are really high and they hurt anyone. He attempted those and then he just handed the mic, turned around and tried to do a backflip off the stage.
Oh my word!
And landed on his head.
Oh, wow.
So it was borderline like, do we need an ambulance? Like, absolutely crazy. But then they were like, don't worry, he does this all the time. And they just pull him off. There's
us constantly telling our students not to be worried about singing on stage because no one's going to die if you get up there. And, might not be true after all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When you just all like, you're like this. Four guys on stage, we're supposed to be doing harmonies, we're just like that. And then the backing track of Aerosmith is just playing with nothing on it. Just on the encore. And you're just like, okay, and then it just goes clang, resolve. We just go, okay, thanks everybody. Move on and just run out the back. Run. We've got to leave. This.
Brilliant.
But yeah, loads of stuff like that.
So how much gigging are you doing these days? Do you gig much anymore, or is it all teaching? What's the balance like for you?
Well, to be fair, because the guy that I did the Naked Vocalist with, Steve, we were in the band together.
Yeah.
With two other guys. Now, Steve has moved to America with his fiancée, so he's not around. And then one of the other guys, I think he just got too old and tired for it, essentially. Because he's like,
happens to the best of us.
I hate this now. So he went over there. So there's me and the other guy, Kev, who kind of like it. And then so we would tend to get a depth singer in to make it 3.
Okay.
G3.
Not 4.
And then we go in, and then basically we get emails, legacy emails. Oh, you did our corporate do 10 years ago. Are you still doing stuff? And then we get those dribble in, and then because Kev is like, well, I'm only going to do it if it's really worthwhile. So he sends an outrageous price back, and 99 times out of 100 they say no. Twice a year though.
All we need.
Yeah. They say, okay, send us a contract. And Kev's like, he just sends me a message, can't believe it. And it's obviously one of them is always at Christmas, isn't it? One of them, it's like corporate due. Another, I've got one next month, the end of next month. So twice a year, essentially.
Twice a year.
Yeah.
That seems like a nice amount to me.
Yeah, keep your toes in.
Yeah. Occasionally I get the offer to do like a single song appearance, like it maybe a couple of times a year, just kind of come and do one song as part of a variety show. And I try because then you can pick a in the band it'd be like it's singing for drunk people.
Yeah,
that's which is fun.
It's polished karaoke.
Yeah, absolutely. It's no big deal. And they they're happy with those crowd pleasers. But when you get the offer to do something that is a bit more like plush and whatever, I'd spend quite a lot of time picking a song that still is going to be accepted and well known, but has feels a bit more connoisseur.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or like something by Donny Hathaway, you know, something like that. So I'm like, okay, really cool. So just a few times a year, I'll put a bit of effort into doing something that I really, really like. And so that they're the other ones that I tend to do.
That's great. I think it's nice to kind of keep it in mind that, you know, most of us got into this teaching malarkey because we enjoyed singing in the first place.
Yeah.
It's easy to lose sight of that and you know.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And get buried by the workload and just don't take anything on. It's a shame. So I don't, and I still feel like I'm progressing as a singer. Even also, I'd still want to get on stage and kind of, put those skills in the environment they were meant for, which means I've really learned them if I can do my pressure. Can't really create myself much sort of false pressure. I'm sort of past the point where I can say to my extended family, can you all sit in the front room while I sing for you? No,
you still do that.
So yeah, I need a gig for that one.
I was going to say, my children have inherited that aspect from me, so now I have to sit and watch them perform to me constantly.
Love it. Move the coffee table.
That's it. Sit down. We're having a show. Turn the lights off. Okay. And then, meanwhile, there's my mum in the background laughing her head off because what goes around comes around.
Oh yeah.
Your turn. Your turn now.
Take that.
Don't even.
Oh, I love it. All right. Was there anything else, Tom, that we specifically wanted to ask about?
No, I think the main thing was the Prince of Wales story. That was we were dying to know about that.
There's the phone.
That's it.
You got it.
Oh, it's been fabulous.
Yeah, it's been great chatting,
Thank you.
having a laugh.
Fun to have a chat. Yeah.
Yeah, on a Monday morning, a
Further
giggle and a laugh.
The podcast that I've done. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
I know. Well, actually, that is one thing. What is your advice for us newbies in the world of podcasting?
I guess.
Seeing as you are an old pro at this, you know, what would your advice be to us or anyone else who is starting up a podcast?
Oh well.
Be kind.
Yeah. You do have to be kind. Do you know what? Steve and I just felt like we were just farting around for 55, 60 episodes, to be honest with you. And when it came to that, because we're quite good friends anyway, so I think the subliminal messages, if my eye twitches, he'll know what that means. Those kind of things. It does make the process of conversation like that bit more streamlined and whatever. But I think really what you want to do is try not to be too formal with it. And then you'll just attract the right bunch, because I think, people are perceptive, aren't they? They know when you're trying to be something you're not, or trying to speak to a demographic that maybe just don't relate to you as much as another demographic, or person, interest type, or anything like that. So as long as we kept it a bit light, added the fun in there, and what we learned over time actually is in the first 10 or 15 episodes, the feedback would be, you don't spend enough time on the content, right? And then the feedback after that was, oh, there's a couple of episodes where, we felt like you guys were in a bad mood or something, because we were like, oh, don't speak much. And then we found that thing of like, actually, we started to get guests on, and then there used to be that kind of nice conversational bit, a little bit of humorousness in there. And that is always what keeps people listening to it, is the relatability of it. So I think really it took us about 25, 30 episodes to really find a groove. Yeah. So you've got to give yourself a lot of time. And I've always toyed with the fact, I look back at the first 10 or 15 episodes and think, oh, do I wipe them off the face of the earth?
No!
The answer, no. It's a journey. And I've learned so much from doing 60 of those, and lots of stuff outside of that. So I think if anybody wants to podcast and start to generate an audience, it does set you up for doing presentations much later down the line really, really well, if you can listen back to yourself and learn and take feedback. That's what.
And who was your favourite guest then, just while you mentioned guests?
Oh, well, it was, for me, the most memorable one was Ingo Tietze, just because we'd learnt from him quite a bit. And then he we just kind of said, do you want to go on a podcast? And he just goes, yeah. And it was like, oh. That's cool. But Scott Allen was also really funny. Do you know Scott Allen?
Yeah.
Scott Allen was great because we actually did a songwriting exercise with him. So you know that songwriting thing where you have a heading and you write a line, you fold it over, you pass it to the next person. And we did that with Scott Allen about, I think it was something about chocolate cake. And we wrote a song and tried to sing it on the podcast.
That's brilliant.
Really fun.
I'm going to have to dig that episode out and have a listen.
I think it's episode 15, I think. I can't remember what one, but that just because he was so up for it, and we did it. I think it was on. Was it in person? Yeah, I think it was in person at Vocalise You. But yeah, that for me, that was like one of the funnest ones. Really getting someone involved in an activity.
So yeah, I was just wondering, have you got more plans to do more Naked Vocalist episodes?
I honestly don't know. I actually do talk to Steve. So we were talking the other day about like what do we do with this? So we certainly aren't closing the door on it because it's about, sort of geographical locations might change, and we both got a lot of projects on. But in terms of podcasting in general, I've just finished up creating a online course. Which has just come to an end, which is going to free me up some time to create more content. And my favorite medium to do that is audio podcasts. So I think really with the Naked Vocalist, we'll leave the door open, but I'll do some stuff for coaches. I've got some things and other collaborations bubbling up right now to do things for a wider audience, like, just singers and coaches together. So yeah, I think really now I've kind of created the time, there'll be more podcast content to come.
So if people are looking for you, then where can we find you so we can find this content?
My teaching website, which is where I've got some stuff, is at chrisjohnsonvocalcoach.com. I also my vocal coach teacher training, which is where I'll release the podcast I'm about to do, maybe a 10 episode series straight out, put them all up at once. That will be at teachvoice.com.
Awesome, and we'll put links to those in the show notes and to the Naked Vocalist as well.
Thank you.
Nice. So it's been lovely chatting this morning. Hopefully you can hear me and it's not just big buzzing noise.
But it's okay.
Hopefully the video editor's got a magic filter for this.
If not, we'll make him re-record it later and lip sync to it.
That would be
RuPaul Drag Race. I need to get my rouge out.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us today, Chris. It's been wonderful as ever to speak to you and hear some wonderful stories and some great advice. I'm sure everybody's going to really enjoy listening to everything you've had to say. And I look forward to seeing, what you're releasing and listening into more podcasts. And I'm definitely going to go and search out that Scott Allen episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
Try that in a future episode.
I'd recommend it.
Yeah, great.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
So that was Chris, and as you can see, Chris is a nice bloke, and we had a good giggle and a good laugh, and he had some very nice words of wisdom for us in our podcasting endeavours as we aim for our 100 episodes.
One day we'll get there.
Eventually.
It was. I like Chris. He's got a good sense of humour. He's one of us Brits.
Yeah. And he's been around for a while in the voice world, I remember being in teacher training with Chris, many 14, 15 years ago in London.
We go back a long way.
Yeah. It's nice that he's still about and he's still in the world of voice, and, he's doing well for himself, and he's got all these things that he's, offering and working with teachers and singers for. So yeah, it was great to catch up with him. Having not seen him for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we appreciate his words of wisdom when it comes to podcasts, because we're still figuring our way through the world of podcasting, but we are getting.
I know we're getting there. We're getting there. Technology isn't getting so troubling for us anymore, is it?
Yeah, it's working. So that that's like one tick.
Exactly.
And we've got our, concise subscribe to us from Randy Rainbow that we talked about last episode. So, we're getting better at that too.
That's it. And
pose.
For those, while we're on that topic, for those people who are interested in the class that Chris taught, they can go back and watch it, can't they, Tom?
They can indeed, yes. So they can go to our website, vocaladvancement.com/events, and they'll be able to find that webinar that they can purchase and watch back and take part in some of the movements and things that we were doing during it to see how it affects your voice, yeah.
Some of us had our cameras on for that and some of us turned them off, didn't they, Tom?
I have no comment on that. I like to look foolish in private, that's all.
I guess that is the advantage of watching the class back later. I know a lot of our IVA teachers are doing that, watching the class back later. That is the advantage, is that you can make a fool of yourself in the privacy of your own home instead of in front of everybody.
And, when you're doing one of these movement webinars, because, recently we had Andrew back and he did a tour of the vagus nerve for us. And somebody joined the webinar halfway through after being at an appointment and forgot to turn himself on mute. So when Mum was stretching one's neck and it was rather painful, one exclaimed out loud during the class.
Oh, Tom, that was hilarious. We're like, does he know?
I had no idea. I'm just stretching. I'm like, oh my God, that's so sore. And everybody's like, are you okay? I'm like, oh crap.
Quick, mute.
Mute. Thankfully, my camera was off, so they did not see the face that went with that. I was not expecting it to be quite as,
Releasing.
it was a very deep stretch.
I love it.
Felt good afterwards, though, I tell you. About an hour later, I was like, oh, that feels great. But at the time, oh, no.
Needed it. Actually, I have to say, I felt the same because I was suffering with a terrible cold last week and we did that. And I had to go and teach my choir after that class. And it helped, definitely helped. A little bit of movement. It's amazing how it can free things up and make things a little easier to use your voice.
Yeah, and I think as well, just drawing awareness, because I don't think we realise how much we kind of hunch, roll shoulders and everything as we're sitting just in our day-to-day life. Even sitting at the piano teaching, you can end up kind of hunched shoulders or shoulders rolling forward that puts so much tension into your shoulders, neck and larynx.
And teaching online is terrible for that because I set my piano up in front of and then I find myself leaning forward on my piano to, talk to people. So if I have a whole day of just online lessons, I feel it in my neck at the end of the day.
Yeah, I end up leaning too far forward to try and type messages over the piano and you feel your shoulders up like this. So it's not good.
No, I know. But then having it on the side is worse because then you're looking over your shoulder the whole time while you're teaching. So, yeah. Oh, the world. Yeah,
I do.
Oh,
I know. Such hard life having a business.
Hard work we do, teaching, singing. Just thinking about all those people who are like labourers and things, and here's me moaning about having to lean over my piano to get
the hardship of it all.
Oh, woe is me.
I know.
It's a hard life, isn't it?
I'm sure you'll cope.
Right, who's on next episode, Tom?
Well, our next episode is the lovely Elizabeth Ann Benson. Dr. Elizabeth Ann Benson, who is she's talking about her book, which was The Trends in Teaching CCM Singing, which is a book that after the webinar I immediately went out and bought and have been working my way through it. And it's a fascinating book. Really, really interesting reads.
And we had some really interesting chats with her. Again, one of those chats that just went on far too long, and we're going to have to cut some of it out to make the episode.
Or me and you are going to have to stop talking too much. At the start, we just cut us out and go straight to the interview. Make sure you tune in for that episode. So, Tom, what's the subscribe and whatnot spiel? Yes, so what you want to do is go to your favorite place where you consume podcasts and search for the Vocal Advancement Podcast. Make sure you follow and like and rate us so that we can work our way through the charts as we continue our growth.
Yeah, that's the point. Rate us on iTunes, people.
Yeah.
Is it iTunes these days? Whatever it is. Apple Podcasts.
Apple Music.
I'm so
No, actually,
old.
Apple Podcasts. Yeah, you're right.
There we go.
Yeah, I forgot. It changes so often. It's hard to keep up with.
Rate
Apple.
us, but only if you're going to rate us highly. Don't rate us if you think we're crap.
5 stars, good comment, and your favourite biscuit.
Fantastic.
We'll be the only podcast in like Apple Podcasts that has all these reviews that are like, I like chocolate digestives, I like tin cans, I like cookie pookies. And Apple will be like, what?
What are they on about?
Then what are they doing?
Right, so that's it. Get on there.
Yeah.
Get rating us highly, obviously, and we'll see you next episode.
Indeed. So take care of yourself and we'll speak to you soon.